They called it the graveyard. Not because people died there, but because dreams did. Hundreds of broken starships drifted silently above Earth, their hulls scarred by battles long forgotten, their names erased from public memory. What was once the pride of humanity's fleet now hung like mechanical tombstones in low orbit. The Galactic Accord had laughed when the Terran fleet fell apart. Humans tried to reach the stars like everyone else, through brute engineering, propulsion, and steel. But their ships were slower, heavier, and more vulnerable. One by one, they were picked off until Earth's attempt to colonize space became an interstellar joke. Other species had evolved elegant systems of travel, biofold drives, gravity ripples, thought-reactive plasma gates. Compared to that, humanity's clunky nuclear engines and FDL pulses were caveman tools. After the last Terran ship exploded near the Altari Loop, Earth received a single message: do not try again. From that day on, no ship left Earth's orbit. No expedition. No scout. Just silence, broken only by the occasional derelict burning through the atmosphere like a falling star. Among the few who didn't give up was a man no one wanted to remember, Dr. Elias Van, formerly a physicist in the Terran Exploration Directorate, now an outcast living on the edge of ruin. 10 years ago, he proposed something outrageous. He called it cognitive folding. Not a technology, not even a machine. A neurological method to shift awareness across space. His peers laughed. The council stripped his credentials. But Elias didn't stop. He didn't argue. He vanished. And while others moved on, he built something alone. In the depths of an abandoned lunar relay station, Elias converted old servers into a neural array. He scrounged cryogenic tanks and psychological amplifiers from scrapyards and black markets. He wasn't building a ship. He was building a bridge, not of metal, but of mind. Years passed. He trained his thoughts like muscles, fasted, meditated, studied ancient practices and cutting-edge neurophysics. The world forgot him, but the fold didn't. One morning, Earth's deep space scanners registered something impossible. A human biosignature, brief, flickering, emerging from the edge of the event-well singularity, a black hole deep beyond known space. The signal lasted only seconds. It matched Elias's neural DNA sequence. Earth Command dismissed it as a ghost ping, a solar flare, a cosmic joke. But Elias knew it had worked. He had touched the other side. He wasn't content with a signal. He wanted presence. So he prepared for one final test. Alone in his station, he initiated the cognitive array. Electrodes burrowed into his scalp. Neural fluids flowed. The machine asked one question: destination? He answered not with words, but a feeling, a place he had never seen but always known. The fold. Lights dimmed. Blood vessels throbbed. His body spasmed. Then stillness. For 13 minutes, the Earth station recorded no brain activity. To any observer, he was dead. But something in the room vibrated, subtle, rhythmic, like a distant pulse syncing with his heartbeat. The machine remained online, not processing data, listening. No rescue came. No messages were sent. No systems failed. But the stars outside shifted by fractions of degrees, just enough for the instruments to log. Then, with a gasp, Elias opened his eyes. They weren't the same. He stood up slower, more deliberate. His pupils dilated and constricted in patterns, not reactions. He looked at the stars like someone who had just returned from war and had learned that the real enemy was expectation. He didn't speak for 3 days. Not a word. Just wrote on the walls. We were never meant to fly. We were meant to fold. Word spread slowly, first among fringe circles, then through banned forums. Whispers of the man who returned from death, of the human who didn't just observe space. He entered it by will alone. Earth Command ignored it until data leaks surfaced. Not theories, logs, coordinates, observation from points in space where no ship had ever traveled. Data only someone there could know. That's when they tried to reach him. But by then he was gone. Not missing, not hidden, just not present. His body was still there, but Elias wasn't. He had returned to the fold. Not by machine, not by accident, by thought, And Earth realized too late that their last starship wasn't made of titanium or plasma coils. It was flesh, nerve, synapse. The thing they dismissed as soft was the only vessel that had ever made it. They had spent centuries trying to punch holes through the universe. Elias walked through it like a door. The Accord heard the rumors. Of course, they didn't believe it. No one did. Not really. Folding by consciousness? That was metaphysics, not physics. But then strange things began happening. Small objects, devices, sensors, messages, appeared on distant colonies that humans could never have reached. They all bore the same signature, EV, and every time they appeared where help was needed most. Famine, war, collapse. A device would appear, a fix would follow. Some species began to panic. Others grew curious. But one thing was clear. Elias hadn't just gone further than anyone else. He had returned with something greater. Access, not to space, to possibility. He became the first traveler. And whether the galaxy liked it or not, the age of starships was over. There was no light, no sound, no motion. Elias existed, but not as he remembered. There was no body to move, no eyes open, no air to breathe. He was thought alone, drifting in something beyond time, beyond space. It wasn't blackness. It was absence, a void that didn't surround him but was him. And yet in that silence, he became aware of motion, not in distance, but in meaning. A ripple in his focus shifted him, not physically, but contextually. When he focused on a concept like gravity, he moved to where gravity shaped reality. When he remembered warmth, he entered suns. When he recalled fear, he found alien ruins frozen in mental echoes. He understood instantly. This wasn't teleportation. This was access. The fold didn't operate on coordinates. It responded to attention. It didn't need fuel or calculations. It needed intent. Elias drifted through places that had no matter. He saw echoes of civilizations long dead, memories left behind in psychic residue. He floated near clusters of living thoughts, non-human, strange, and ancient. Each being that had ever imagined something left a trace. And the fold remembered them all. He wasn't exploring stars. He was swimming through memory. Each world he visited was a thought. Each anomaly a remnant of someone's will. He realized a terrifying truth. The fold wasn't empty. It was crowded, not with bodies, but with minds. Consciousnesses that shed form, lost of time, existed here in layers. Some were intelligent, some were reflexes, some were barely recognizable. But not all were passive. Some noticed him. They came as pulses at first, emotional storms. He felt their curiosity, then their hostility. Not spoken, not broadcasted, just pure feeling. He was an intruder, a newborn mind, glowing with purpose, disturbing a place that wanted stillness. These anti-conscious entities, fold predators, tried to consume him. They didn't think. They undid thinking. Every time he doubted himself, they grew stronger. They fed on confusion, fear, contradiction. But Elias was human. He had grown up in a world of chaos and contradiction. Doubt was familiar. Fear was background noise. He fought them not by resisting, but by remembering. His mother's voice, the heat of sun on skin, the cold smell of ozone before storm. These weren't defenses. They were anchors. Every memory sharpened him. Every emotion solidified his presence. The fold didn't just respond to mind. It was made of mind. The stronger the memory, the stronger the path. He wove a trail of experiences behind him like a mental thread. He began to navigate. Fold predators lost his scent when he focused on clarity. The key was intelligence. It was resilience. Humans didn't conquer through superiority. They survived by enduring themselves. And the fold, for all its complexity, was vulnerable to that simple persistence. He saw other minds, non-human travelers who had entered long before. Some succeeded for moments, even years, but none had returned. They were fragmented, stretched thin by trying to control the fold rather than submit to it. Elias didn't either. He didn't control or surrender. He adapted. That was the trick. humanity's ancient edge. He didn't shape the fold. He let the fold reshape him. Through his journey, Elias began building something else. Structure. Just as neurons form pathways of repetition, he created loops, bridges, routes through stable mental states. Grief led to a water-world memory. Determination opened a corridor of black stars. Wonder, a nebula of floating cathedrals. Each emotion created a gateway. Each repetition strengthened it. The fold became a network of anchored intentions. He knew what had to be done. He had to return, not just to Earth, but as Earth, to bring back more than information, to bring back possibility. The fold whispered a warning in no words. If you bring others, the galaxy will change. But he didn't hesitate. Humans didn't evolve to preserve peace. They evolved to challenge it. He concentrated everything. Memories of his birth, the taste of iron, the feeling of betrayal, the first time he watched the stars and felt small. These weren't just thoughts. They were launch codes. They became a singularity within the fold, a critical mass of identity, a burst of intention. He wasn't Elias anymore. He was humanity focused into form. He surged backward, not through distance, but through context collapse. The fold cracked around him like ice under stress. Space screamed not in sound, but in topology. The physical universe reasserted itself. He awoke in his body, cold and soaked in cerebral fluid. But something was wrong. He wasn't alone. His brain scans registered 9 overlapping neural signatures. All human, all real, not voices, not personalities. States. It was as if parts of other minds had folded into his during the journey. Traces of future travelers, unborn thoughts, ancestral echoes. He was still Elias, but he was also a map. He stood, stronger than before, not in muscle, in purpose. He looked around the station, now old and flickering, but he didn't need it anymore. He could feel Earth's magnetic field like warmth on skin. He could hear the moon's orbit like a distant heartbeat. He was tethered to reality by choice. He walked outside into lunar dust, looked up, and saw the stars. But this time he didn't feel distance. He felt presence. He closed his eyes and the fold responded, not with resistance, but with recognition. He wasn't a trespasser anymore. He was a traveler. The message arrived without warning. No transmission protocols. No encryption. Just a pattern of pulses buried in Earth's magnetic field. Encoded emotion, not language. It radiated from the Pacific tectonic plate, humming like a heartbeat in the ocean floor. Earth Command dismissed it at first. Then came the anomalies. Seismographs began reporting fluctuations that defied tectonic logic. Submarines lost orientation for minutes at a time, only to resurface hundreds of kilometers off course. Deep-sea drones picked up geometric shapes etched into the seabed. Perfect, concentric symbols that weren't there the week before. They weren't carved. They were fused into the crust. And then came the pulse again. Stronger. The pulse carried a signature. Elias Venn. He hadn't been seen in over a year. No communication. No sightings. Just rumors. Of strange phenomena following patterns. Of collapses avoided at the last second. Of impossible devices solving unsolvable problems. Each one marked with the same 3 letters. EV. But this was different. This wasn't an artifact. It was a call. The first to respond was not the military, nor the scientific elite. It was a child, 8 years old, quiet, isolated, autistic, according to his records. He sat in the middle of his classroom and began drawing shapes on the floor. Circles within circles, lines spiraling inward, eyes closed the entire time. When asked what he was doing, he replied without inflection, "He's asking for a door." Within a week, it happened again. In Norway, then Ghana, then Peru. Children, elderly, patients recovering from comas, all receiving the same impression. A request. No voice, just a sense of urgency. The request wasn't to act, but to feel. Specific emotions. Guilt, hope, curiosity. The emotions appeared in sync with fold disturbances. Spikes in solar wind that carried no particles but induced hallucinations in fold-sensitive minds. Earth was being prepared, not invaded. It became clear what Elias had done. He had seeded humanity, not with technology, but with resonance. Certain humans, randomly selected, it seemed, were now able to respond to Fold frequency, not by effort, by nature. Elias had rewritten the conditions for space travel, not with ships, with minds. And now, he needed a door wide enough to bring someone else through. The Fold couldn't be forced open. It required a collective state, and Earth in all its chaos had the range of emotions needed to do it. Each human served as a note. Together, they formed a chord. Elias had become a conductor. Earth Command panicked. They tried to shut it down, declared psychological containment zones, rolled out sedatives en masse, initiated cognitive firewall protocols. It only amplified the signal. Fear was part of the key. It was an amplifier. Every act of suppression strengthened the emotional spectrum. Then something else changed. In orbit, the graveyard shifted. Derelict starships, long thought dead, began emitting low-frequency harmonics. Not power systems, resonance fields. They weren't reactivating. They were responding. Old hulls began to glow faintly, not with energy, with memory. Each vessel had stored the last thoughts of its crew: pain, failure, love, rage. Now those echoes synchronized with the Earth field, like bells ringing in unison. And then it happened. The sky over the South Pole split, not visually, not physically, but perceptually. Every human on Earth experienced a simultaneous absence, a moment of complete detachment, like reality holding its breath. For 3 seconds, clocks froze. Electrons halted. Consciousness drifted half a heartbeat to the left. When time resumed, something was standing at the heart of Antarctica. Not a ship, not a structure, a human. Elias had returned, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, the ice steamed. Patterns bloomed in the snow, mathematical fractals spiraling into light. And in that shimmering frost stood another figure, not human. Its shape defied physics. It wore reality like a mask. When it stepped forward, gravity twisted slightly. Sound dulled. No threat, no weapons, just presence. Ancient, curious, terrifying. Earth's systems went dark for 7 minutes. No communication, no satellites, no engines, just silence. When everything came back online, there was one new file uploaded globally. No origin, no sender. A single sentence in every language. You're ready. The Fold had sent an emissary. Elias explained nothing. He didn't have to. Humanity had felt the process. This was no longer a story about him. It was about what came next. Humanity had discovered a truth no one else had. The mind was the only true vessel. The Fold didn't need ships. It needed vision. That was the weird trick. Not faster engines. Not stronger hulls. Just belief, sharpened into discipline. And the Fold had waited eons for someone to figure that out. Elias walked across the snow, the emissary beside him, and disappeared into horizon. Not teleported, not vanished, simply unfolded. The Accord tried to make sense of it. They called emergency councils. Some declared Earth a threat, others a mystery, but none could stop what was already happening. Fold echoes began to ripple across other worlds, activated by human minds living on colonies, outposts, slums. Not the elite, not the chosen, just anyone with a deep enough memory and a strong enough feeling. The age of starships had ended, not with a bang, not with war, with understanding. And for the first time in galactic history, the center of exploration was not a throne world or high council. It was Earth. They called it the Second Genesis. But there was no fire, no commandment, no divine spark descending from the sky. It began in hospitals and prisons, in forests and flooded cities, in forgotten places where silence had outlived hope. Humanity didn't ascend. It bled forward, through grief, rage, and stubborn curiosity. The Fold didn't discriminate. It didn't care about rank or title. It responded only to inner weight. And so the next wave of travelers weren't trained. They were driven. The man who spent 40 years building sand sculptures no one saw. The girl who drew equations on her bedroom ceiling to understand why her father left. The janitor who sang to himself at night. So the halls didn't feel empty. The fold found them and answered with access. Those who entered it didn't come back the same, not because they were damaged, but because they returned with part of others, insights, feelings, even flashes of alien cognition. One came back speaking a language no one had taught her, yet every listener understood it instinctively. Another returned with no voice, but every plant he touched grew geometrically, responding to his unspoken thought. Humanity didn't become powerful by dominating the fold. It became meaningful by integrating it. Cities began redesigning themselves around emotional resonance rather than efficiency. Transportation ran on intention, not combustion. Children learned to navigate memory threads as play. Crime fell, not because of law, but because understanding became instinct. The Accord watched in confusion and fear. This wasn't technological progress. It was ontological divergence. Humanity was becoming something else, unclassifiable. Other species had reached the fold, but all had tried to conquer it with logic, geometry, or divine reverence. Humans brought their pain, their contradictions, their humor, and somehow that cracked the rules open. By year 5, Earth wasn't alone. Entire regions of the galaxy began folding toward it, not physically, causally. Events occurred in reverse ripple. A ship launched a rescue before the distress call was made. A planet bloomed with terraforming agents hours before the environmental disaster that would have required them. Fold travelers didn't just move through space. They moved through relevance. And in the middle of it all, Elias Venn disappeared again. But his disappearance wasn't loss. It was dispersal. He existed now in fragments, moments shared between travelers, a glance that reassured, a whisper in a collapsing dream, a sudden clarity before death. He had become a folded constant, not a person, but a permission embedded in the structure of what humanity was becoming. The fold was no longer a mystery. It was a medium, and humans, they were the first species to realize they were already tuned to it, not as users, but as carriers. Fold stations replaced starports, built not from steel, but from memory-stabilized material. Dream lattice, grief crystal, curiosity composites. Each station anchored by a major human experience. Some were joyful, a station powered entirely by the first kiss of millions. Others darker, stabilized by the memories of betrayal, loneliness, or sacrifice. None were feared. They were accepted. The first interspecies fold mission was launched on year 8, not from Earth, but from a tiny moon base built by fold children. They invited an Accord biologist, a Kara diplomat, and a silent observer from the Isla conglomerate. No one returned. But 7 days later, the galaxies began sharing art, not physical pieces, but feelings translated across cultural context. A symphony composed by shared pain, a sculpture made of laughter, a weapon turned inward and reassembled into empathy. For the first time in recorded galactic history, war budgets decreased, not by peace treaties, but by irrelevance. Fold-capable minds couldn't be ambushed, couldn't be deceived, because the moment you lied, they felt it. Empathy became tactical superiority. Not everyone embraced the change. Some tried to weaponize it, attempting to build synthetic minds capable of triggering fold responses. But without true emotion, without earned memory, the results were catastrophic. 2 research stations vanished into recursive thought loops, echoing the last screams of the creators in endless feedback until silence reasserted itself. The fold didn't punish. It simply refused to simulate false meaning. So Earth adapted again, not with rules, with stories. Every new traveler was trained not in math or language, but in narrative, understanding that emotion, story, identity, these weren't side effects. They were the syntax of movement now. Fold pilots didn't memorize charts. They composed experiences. To reach another star, they needed a memory strong enough to justify the connection. The fold didn't care about mass. It cared about significance. Entire fleets were replaced by one-person journeys, and every return trip brought something back. Not minerals, not weapons, but insight. Fold civilizations formed around questions rather than answers. What does justice feel like to a blind species? What does music mean to a hive mind? What happens when 3 species dream the same dream? And through it all, the same signal persisted. echoing quietly from the depths of the fold. You're ready. It never changed. Because the fold wasn't a place to arrive. It was a state to sustain. It responded not to greatness, but to authenticity. And in humanity, flawed, volatile, illogical, it finally found what it had waited for. Not a conqueror, not a custodian, but a conversation. And that was the trick. No engines, no warships, no perfect species. Just humans, carrying their broken stories into the dark and lighting it up